Hi, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today for COVID-19 and Collections, What's Next? I'm Nikki Kornbluth from the marketing team here at TrueAccord, and I am thrilled to be here with two excellent speakers today. Sheila Monroe is the CEO of TrueAccord Corp. Before joining TrueAccord, she spent many years with Alliance Data Systems as their head of collections and bank operations, and then with Barclays Bank, where she held the role of Global Chief Operating Officer for Barclaycard, and then Managing Director of Global Collection and Recoveries for all of Barclays retail products. While at Barclays, she led their digital transformation, rolling out collection websites and other self-serve tools for pre-charge-off customers, achieving 86% self-serve rates in the US and the UK, and the highest NPS of any operating area in the bank. We also have on the line Mega Rankin, the VP of Client Success here at TrueAccord. Prior to joining TrueAccord, she spent 20 years in financial services, primarily with large corporate banks. Mega has held a wide variety of roles, from creating sales strategies, serving as the credit executive of default strategy at PNC Bank during the last financial crisis, as well as managing, servicing, and default teams across many types of consumer products. Mega has also worked extensively with regulators to translate regulations into policy, process, and control creation. Most recently, Mega was a senior vice president and division manager in technology and operations with KeyBank, where she led teams in discovering opportunities for straight-through processing through a variety of technology solutions such as AI and machine learning. I couldn't be more excited to be here with the two of them. I know they have a lot of interesting things to say today, but just to give you a heads up of where we're going to go with this presentation, we're going to start with some introductions just to lay the scene. Then we'll talk a little bit about the COVID-19 impact on collections. And finally, we'll go through what's next. What do we see happening in the industry and in the world at large? Throughout the session, feel free to chat us or submit questions through the Q&A box on your Zoom screen, and we'll save time at the end for a live Q&A session. If at any point during the session you have something you want to ask, feel free to send it right away, and we'll compile those all and get to them all at the end. So just to give you some background on TrueAccord, we were founded in 2013, and our data-driven debt collection platform is disrupting the collections industry by helping businesses collect more debt online than traditional methods. TrueAccord's platform is powered by machine learning with a decision engine that analyzes consumer behavior and delivers personalized and empathetic consumer experiences. By communicating at the right time, in the right channel, with payment options that meet consumer needs, TrueAccord provides exceptional recovery rates for top 10 financial institutions, debt buyers, lenders, and technology companies. And most of our communications are digital, and that's over email, SMS, voicemail drops, and that means that we have a wealth of proprietary digital debt interaction data. So the data you'll see in today's presentation is compiled data from across 10 million consumers of major banks, issuers, e-commerce companies, and direct lenders, and generally covers the time period between January 1st and July 31st of this year so that we can get a full view of what happened. So without further ado, I'd like to hand it over to Sheila and Mega to talk a little bit more about this impact we saw.
Great, thank you, Nikki. And thanks to all of you who are joining us today and taking the time to go through this webinar with us. If your inbox is anything like mine, you're likely suffering from webinar invitation overload, which seems to be what happens in this pandemic when people can't travel and they want to get together. But so really appreciate your time today. But before we dive into a lot of the payment trends, I just wanted to take some time to just reflect on the unique characteristics of our economic and social state that forms the basis for this discussion today. So I think, as we all realize by now, this is a really different type of recession. You know, as the realization of COVID-19 that it was going to be a problem, and not just in other countries, but in this one, a problem for us too. I'm not sure any of us could have really predicted the impact on the credit and collection business. So shelter-in-place orders started in the early part of March. March 14th, I think or March 4th was the first. World Health Organization declared a pandemic on March 11th. Non-essential businesses started to shut down across the country. And then the unemployment rate spiked very quickly, as you can see on the chart. And I think most of us who have been in this business for a while, we're really bracing for a challenging quarter, realistically a challenging year, frankly, but it didn't happen. And I think, you know, if we look at the characteristics, although unemployment spiked, other trends just didn't follow the normal path of a recession. Savings rates were up, home prices didn't drop. The stock market dropped, but frankly came back almost as quickly as it went down. And I think the key factors there are three key factors. And it was all about disposable income, right? So incomes were up. Stimulus checks were received from consumers who had absolutely no impact from COVID, people who were still employed, people who were on Social Security and had no loss of income, as well as a lot of workers in lower paid jobs that were particularly impacted began making more on unemployment than they were making working, which was by design to keep people safe. At the same time, expenses reduced. Expenditures on entertainment and travel were way down because, let's face it, things were closed and we couldn't go spend and we didn't feel comfortable traveling. And then I think the third characteristic that adds to that is that the banks were very good this time around. They learned from 2008 and they were very proactive in setting up skip pay programs, forbearance programs, hardship programs, which gave consumers some extra breathing space. So I've got all this money and less expenditures, and people definitely chose to pay off bills. So as a result, we saw a very different payment trends and customer behavior than we would expect to see during the time of a pandemic and in the midst of a recession. And Meg is going to talk to you about that.
Thank you, Sheila. Yeah, so, this unusual recession you spoke about, Sheila, led to increased consumer engagement, which is kind of counterintuitive to what we knew from the last financial crisis for all of the reasons that you've already outlined. At TrueAccord, one of our main customer contact channels is email. So our patented machine learning product, Heartbeat, uses a variety of engagement measures to learn from, one of which is click-through rate. So this measure tells us how frequently customers click through links in an email as an indicator of engagement with the content. So if you look at both of the charts, so the click-through rate and the lump sum payments almost follow some of the significant dates relative to the pandemic. National emergency in the US was declared on March 13th, and you'll see a significant dip, especially in the click-through rates, that mid-March period, as there was such uncertainty, right? And people weren't really sure what to expect. Some people thought this was going to be a 90-day thing. Others weren't sure, what their employment situation was going to be. And then you go fast forward just a few months to that mid-April timeframe when the CARES Act was implemented, and consumers really began to reprioritize that discretionary income that you spoke of, Sheila. And you can see where the charts just take a serious upward trend relative to some of those events, right? And the timing of people having a change in how they were able to use their money and the amount of money that they had. So those tough times that you spoke of that we were bracing for didn't come, right? Consumers wanted to pay off their debt, and they wanted to pay it off in lump sum payments in many, many cases, right? They wanted to use that money to remedy their outstanding debts. So at the same time, we kind of realized, hey, we have a lot of consumers who are on payment plans already and might need some additional flexibility, just based on where they were. And so we wanted to be mindful about what those options might provide. So I'll turn to Sheila for more of the importance of flexibility in that part of the cycle.
Yeah, thank you, Mega. I mean, as we didn't know at the beginning of March or even the middle of March what we know now. So as we cast our minds back to the beginning of March when all this started and we just weren't sure what to expect, our biggest concern for consumers was about affordability. We didn't want to see consumers who were already on payment plans faced with a decision to cancel a plan or simply to stop paying because they experienced a change in income, or maybe they just wanted to play it safe and preserve some cash for a while because of the uncertainty. So being able to make progress toward being debt-free is really important to the psyche of a consumer. So derailing that in the midst of everything else could really help, end up with a consumer feeling hopeless in the midst of that uncertainty. So we also didn't want payment plan affordability to stop consumers with newly placed debts with us from signing up to a plan to begin with when they look at plan options and consider how much am I willing to commit to in this debt when I have a great deal of uncertainty? So we wanted to make sure that customers who were more tentative or maybe more impacted, that they had the flexibility that they needed. For us, it was more important to keep a paying customer on a plan, even at a reduced rate, rather than force them into like dropping a plan due to affordability issues. So how did we do that? We immediately introduced new banners on the servicing website, letting customers who were on payment plans know that they could modify a plan by extending the number of remaining payments. So we made it really super simple. Just go into the plan and maybe if a consumer had 12 payments remaining, switch it to 18, and that lowers your payment. And they could see right there that they could get an affordable payment. And previously, we could do this, but it required calling in and doing it with an agent. So this was a new capability that we added. And then using machine learning, we can quickly predict which consumers may struggle to stay on a plan. And we can use email or push notifications or website banners or even text messaging only to those consumers at risk, or we can open it up to everyone. And for this situation, we opened it up to most everyone on plan, just to allow people to see that they had that flexibility. You can see the chart on plan modifications. Plan modifications jumped right away during this period of uncertainty, came back down to baseline as people started receiving assistance through the CARES Act. And naturally, this is starting to trend back up a bit as those benefits, as well as deferred mortgages and deferred credit card payments begin to expire. The beauty of this, though, giving the flexibility, is that plan breakage rates held steady throughout the period. In other words, giving consumers that flexibility enabled them to stick to a commitment that they were comfortable with rather than abandoning a plan altogether. So you can also see on the chart on the right that as we loosened up parameters for new payment plans being signed up to, customers signed up to longer plans during that spike, and they continued to be up again. But again, plan sign-up rates also increased. So we've got consumers signing up for a little bit longer plans, but signing up at a higher level. And one of the ways that we bring value to clients is by creating this very steady and predictable revenue stream in the form of an annuity. People come to TrueAccord, they sign up for payment plans, they stick to them. So we're able to achieve this higher than normal payer rate while using science, machine learning, to keep people on their plans and help manage them.
Yeah, and given the importance of flexibility during this time, we'd be really curious to hear from the audience. We're about to launch a poll that you should see on your Zoom screen. Are your consumers able to modify their payment plans? So yes, on the phone, yes, online with a self-service tool, yes, on either of those options, or just no, there is no ability to modify their payment plans. And we'll give 10 more seconds for everyone in the audience. I see the answers coming in already, but we'll give a little bit longer before we share those results. All right, looks like we have a two-way tie coming through. We'll give 5 more seconds. All right, and let's share those results. So it looks like almost everyone here today has the ability to modify a payment plan with their plans, but almost half of the audience can only do it on the phone with an agent.
I think that's amazing. I mean, the thing is about having the flexibility and offering the flexibility. So on the phone is perfectly great for consumers. So it looks like a lot of flexibility, which is great. Hopefully everyone's seeing the same benefit from it that we're seeing.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about how we were able to at TrueAccord help our clients during this time. Many of our clients were in a really tough spot, right? So using multiple collection agencies, where many of the agencies struggle to shift to a work from home environment, right? Traditional shops are not set up to, nimbly move a whole workforce to home. Other clients we talked to were really thinking about how to proactively de-risk with a move towards more digital collections, right? We, as an industry, needed to think about how we prepare for the onslaught of additional delinquencies and charge-offs. As Sheila, you mentioned, right, we do foresee that happening as some of the forbearance and the payment holiday programs begin to expire. And consumers, are kind of catapulted in terms of how they have to manage that debt in a way that is unknown, right, or is uncertain with all of the benefits from the CARE program up in the air still. So one of the benefits of TrueAccord is our largely automated process enables us to carry agent loads that are well above those of a traditional agency, where maybe a traditional agency sits around 1,500, maybe to 2,500 accounts per agent. We're at about 80,000, and that is largely due to our the way that our digital collections is administered, right? So it's not call heavy, it's not human dependent. And because we operate in a cloud environment, we were able to write a policy and send our agents home within a matter of a week. So we experienced no real downtime in the transition, right? So, the collection activities that we were engaged with, on behalf of our clients didn't stop. There wasn't a pause in our capability in our contact efforts. So just kind of further building on that idea of, resiliency, that's another way that using machine learning from a collections perspective really assists us in terms of, being resilient in uncertain times. Many of our existing clients said, hey, we're kind of double down with TrueAccord. We've seen good results so far. We believe that those will continue based on the nature of, how you collect digitally. Our placements during this period actually grew by 32% within our existing client base, and has put us in a position where we're well over our Q2 plan for, our commitments to our clients by about 83%. So pretty significant. And then, so we think about then what comes next, right? So I'll turn that over for a quick poll first, and then we'll get into the what's next.
So we want to know, over the next 12 months, what is your biggest concern? So try to choose one that's the biggest. And if you don't see any on the screen here that feel like the biggest one, feel free to choose that other option and just chat us in the chat window what that is that you're worried about.
So Nikki, in the meantime, while folks are completing that, we got a question that came in, which is what digital channel would you say is the best response rate in dense metropolitan areas? Is it ringless voicemail, voice broadcast, text, email, or other? So our approach at TrueAccord is we generally start with email. And we start with email for a lot of reasons. We have a lot of real estate on email, so we can get a lot of messaging in, and we can also learn quite a bit. Did you open an email? Did a customer click through to the website? What was the browsing pattern? How does that then inform the next best action? We typically then use some of the other tools where we're not getting good email engagement. So they tend to come in as auxiliary. And we have, for example, text messaging. We get great response rates in texting for populations that have been largely unresponsive to emails. So the way we use the strategies is very much our machine learning algorithm is choosing the channel, the content, the tone, the offer, everything, through the machine learning algorithm to connect individually with each consumer. I hope that answers just a little bit about how we use the channels.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great point. And we can now share these poll results. And it looks like it's, again, close to a tie between pre-charge-off delinquency rising and lower liquidation rates due to high unemployment. We also got a few others on a similar note: the lack of future stimulus / high unemployment, rise in charge-offs 3 to 6 months after loan modifications expire. So definitely there's a lot of concern here about what we're going to see next. So I think that's a great jumping off point to kind of discuss some of what we're seeing.
Thanks, Nikki. So we've talked a lot about some of the factors to think about, right, that are somewhat uncertain. It looks like in the chat, folks further, kind of restated some of those unknown variables, right? Unemployment rate. We know that there's lots of talk right now, right, and opinions, forecasts, but we do know that the Fed, right, is predicting double-digit unemployment at least through the end of the year. We know that we have a lot of large corporate CEOs who are also predicting and building models around all the scenarios, right, that could be present based on unemployment trends. And we know all the other things, right, that are up in the air. But it's kind of a contradictory time period, right? The stock market yesterday hit an all-time high, and with all the uncertainty, there's clearly an idea that positive trends are starting to be demonstrated within the economy. We know that, the unemployment job claims, while they are, more than double what they were at their highest during the last financial crisis, we're starting to see a slowdown in the number of claims filed. So those are typically pretty positive indicators until you look at the other side, which is more than double where we were at our highest point in 2009. So, we know that the Senate left for August recess with no agreement on the future stimulus programs. So I think the key here is how do we adapt to changing tides that we see, right? Because it's not a normal recession like we have seen in the past. So that uncertainty will continue, I think, to be, woven through how we think about our businesses.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. And this slide is kind of funny because, what to expect. It's anyone's guess, right? Disclaimer, we don't know what's going to happen next. And I would say, look, if Jamie Dimon, who says JP Morgan Chase has modeled out at least 5 possible scenarios because he doesn't know what to expect, then certainly I'm not going to claim to know what to expect either. However, we've got a couple data points that we can certainly talk about. So a recent CFPB survey found that 52% of households could only cover expenses for 2 months or less with a loss of an income. And I don't think that surprises any one of us that have been in this business for a long time. Americans are consumers more than they are savers. That's not particularly surprising, but it is very concerning with no relief from COVID in sight and the devastation that could continue to have on various businesses and the knock-on impact to employment. I've also talked to a lot of our clients as well as non-client creditors to see what they're thinking about. And most of them seem to be modeling this 20% unemployment scenario. And, they learned from what happened in 2008, what happened in an 8 to 10% unemployment scenario, and have extrapolated that out into potential impact then the rest of the year. The banks I've spoken with, and particularly banks and lenders, depending on the size of the bank, they're telling me that if this becomes true, that by the end of the year, they will have to hire an additional 700 to 2,300 additional collectors than what they have right now. That's a lot. And that's just to deal with early stage delinquencies as they rise and trying to work that early stage delinquency in their non-automated current collection methodologies. Now that's daunting, whether you're hiring onshore, offshore, in-house, or outsourced. That's a lot of collectors that are going to be coming into the universe that, as we all know, take at least 90 days to come up to proficiency levels. And as we saw on the poll, there's 2 things happening and some comments in here. There's 2 concerns. It's both rising delinquencies, pre-charge-off delinquencies, as well as rising charge-off levels. Clients and prospects, for this reason, are reaching out for help with hardship programs and to discuss help with pre-charge-off debt. This is where the hiring is going to come from. As pre-charge-off debt rises, that's where the hundreds and hundreds of collectors come in to make all the outbound phone calls. Now, as luck would have it, we were already working on launching our new product, Retain. So Retain leverages the foundational capabilities of our Recover product to bring digital outreach and machine learning into this pre-charge-off space, which will really dramatically reduce or even eliminate the need to hire collectors as all this extra debt is being absorbed. And I'm not here to make a sales pitch. That's not the purpose of today. So that's all I'm going to say about it. Just, feel free to reach out to us after the webinar if you'd like a little bit more information on Retain. So my personal view, and I have to say, all forward-looking statements are purely speculative and should not be used as advice. That these trends that we're talking about with COVID unchecked, with no imminent vaccine, will continue to create a significant amount of third-party recovery volume in 2021. So for perspective on that, US banks in 2019 set aside $55 billion to cover potential loan losses. In a recent study from Accenture, they're estimating that banks will have to set aside an additional 210 to $265 billion to cover write-offs for bad loans in 2020. So that's pretty astronomical change from one year to another. That's going to make for much more potential inventory, but maybe much less collectible or have very, lower liquidation rates than we've seen in the past several years. And, when you think about that, high rates, low liquidation, call caps, becoming imminent toward the end of the year, more call blocking technology, a digital strategy in this space is going to be more important than ever. That digital outreach, the flexibility that you're going to create or that you need someone to create for you. And as Megha said previously at TrueAccord, we rely very little on agents. So we don't have to worry about who's making their commission, who's not making their commission, if we're spending too much on collectors to work for our clients without enough return, because Heartbeat, our machine learning system, is going to continue to reach out and interact with customers regardless of toughening macroeconomic trends or payment trends. And that's just a real key to the ability to thrive, not just survive, but to be able to thrive in a high volume, low liquidity environment and provide great returns for our clients. So with that, how about we get to another poll?
Yeah, we really would like to know, based on everything that you've been planning for and what you've heard today, how important will digital collection strategies be to your company in the next 12 months? All right, we'll give about 10 more seconds. And we'll close that up and share the results. So I'm really curious who this 2% is, who thinks it's not at all important. But it looks like the majority of people today feel that it's very important or more, and that's really promising to hear. We would love to ask a quick follow-up questions, which is, how satisfied are you with your current digital capabilities? So given that it's an important part of your strategy, do you feel today that you're pretty ready to execute on that? All right, we're seeing some interesting results coming in. We'll give it just a bit longer.
I'm guessing at least 2% are very satisfied.
Well, I think you may be a fortune teller, because it is exactly that 2%. But it looks like we have a good mix around the somewhat satisfied and a little bit more and a little bit less. a few people have no digital capabilities yet. Really interesting mix here.
Yeah, I think it's really telling. And I think, you know, what I would say about it is impossible to go to a collection conference these days or have a collection conference discussion that doesn't revolve somewhat around automation, digital service, AI, machine learning, et cetera. So I think everyone's onto, you know, most people are onto the need to do that. Certainly we are here and would like to help with that. If you need help, again, feel free to reach out.
I think it's also interesting to, for institutions who have been around for some period of time to find that balance between building, you know, future digital capabilities while still having to consider their current capabilities, whatever those systems are, right? And how a digital solution might link into and maybe enhance their current capabilities, and trying to find that proper balance in a way that is also quick to market, right? Based on where we are with all of the uncertainty, but the trends that we know are coming at some point will be an interesting thing to talk to people about as they do start to build out some of those capabilities.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you so much. So we've been getting a bunch of audience questions, and I just want to remind everyone that you can continue to send those in through the Q&A box or the chat window on your Zoom screen. But we'll kick off some questions and we can move from there. So one person wants to know, what has been your most surprising takeaway that you did not plan for during this period?
Yeah, I think the biggest surprise, speaking for myself personally, is that consumers, in the midst of a pandemic where I might have thought people would be more conservative, thinking, well, where is this going to go? What is going to happen to my job? What is going to happen to the health of myself or my loved ones? I was surprised that consumers parted with that cash. Rather than almost hoarding that cash for, you know, the unknown. That was personally my biggest surprise. Meg, I don't know about you.
Yeah, I think this idea of hope, right? So through all of this, the human element of hope, I think is very present and very real. And so you start to see people doing things like investing in their home, but there's also a hope of, if I pay down my debt, I set myself up for a better future when we get out of this. So I think like a hopeful message coming out of this was surprising in many ways. You know, I look around my neighborhood and I laugh because the amount of contractors putting up, you know, fixing things that had been neglected. People, I think, are investing more in the longer term, and cleaning up some of their debt is certainly a part of that hopefulness.
Yeah. Someone wants to know if we could talk about digital contact frequency, especially when you're replacing voice entirely. So how do you think about, is it the same or is it different?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I would talk a little bit about our approach to collection and doing it sort of less in a parameterized basis and more in a machine learning environment, which is the way it works for TrueAccord is more about mimicking a conversation. So for example, consumer receives an email, doesn't engage with the first email. They get a different email. That consumer gets a different email, by the way, depending on their debt type, balance, other characteristics, and the fact that they didn't even open the first one, or they get another consumer maybe opened it, didn't click through the website. They're going to get a different communication next. A customer who opened an email, clicked through the website, considered payment, but didn't sign up, they would get. So our process is very customized to the individual consumer behavior. And I would say that up front, which is what makes it different. And sometimes frequency of communication depends on the consumer's reaction. So for example, if I know if a consumer goes out onto the payment plan page and we can see that they considered options, we can see their browsing pattern, we can see everything they clicked on, and you know, luckily it's not a human looking at that trying to decide what to do next, but it's feeding into the algorithm. And again, this machine learning algorithm that's looking at this has seen over 13 million consumers so far. So it can anticipate quite a bit based on how a consumer's acting with this. But in that case where a consumer goes out, looks at options, doesn't sign up, they might get another communication within 20 or 30 minutes saying, hey, didn't find what you needed, try again. They click on the next website, it takes them to a different landing page with different options. So we're mimicking that human conversation with that customer now. If a customer is not engaging with us, we do have some limitations built into our compliance, built-in compliance program, so that we don't send proactive emails more than 3 times a week, that we don't end up bombarding with multiple channel stuff too. We wouldn't want to send 3 emails and 3 SMSs and 4 voicemail drops and a couple, and a couple other things, push notifications on top of it. So we do sort of control that. But we've also learned enough through the years that there's the heartbeat will start to recognize that point of diminishing returns as well. And when a consumer has just not been responsive to any channels, it'll start gating itself, both on a particular channel as it switches and in total communication. Because what we don't want to do as a digital company is end up with people feeling harassed where they opt out of anything, opt out of voicemail or opt out of email or opt out of SMS. Our domain reputation in sending SMSs is critically important, and managing that relies on people opening and engaging with our emails. So for context, at TrueAccord, we send over 20 million emails to consumers per month, with a higher inbox and open inbox placement and open rate than many retailers. And that takes a lot of energy and science and time to create that kind of response.
Yeah, speaking of compliance, which you brought up there, we did get a question. Given the evolving nature of different state regulations during COVID, how were we able to respond to that?
Yeah, so it's a great question, right? And it's the challenge of every collection shop in the land, right, is to meet the compliance expectations and the hurdles. And certainly during a pandemic like this, where states were really coming out with some bold requirements, one of the benefits of Heartbeat is that it does have, the parameters within Heartbeat are very easy to adjust. So where, kind of some of the legacy systems where it's hard coded and, it requires all kinds of extensive coding and longer tailed work, we're able to adjust pretty nimbly within those parameters. And then we have a compliance tracker that Sheila referenced, which also makes sure that, as we're changing parameters, they're in compliance with the base expectation for FDCPA, for example. It's a great question.
Great. There's a question here about performance and how do digital debt collection strategies compare to the traditional call and collect model?
Was that from a performance perspective, Nikki, or?
Yeah, I'm going to say probably performance, maybe engagement, all of that. Yeah,
so when I compare and contrast the two, I would think about it in a few different areas. One is the performance, the liquidation rate, right? And how do we perform against traditional agencies? And we perform very well. I think this is always probably a big surprise to many of our clients who come on board with us and think, yeah, I know that I need to move into this digital space. It seems like the right thing to do, but maybe I'm a little skeptical of performance. How can you get the same results or better results without making phone calls? That's the way collections worked for 100 years. And so when we have a variety of clients, many of us were in kind of the horse race with others, and we traditionally are on par with or better. And in some cases, we've outperformed other agencies by 3 times the performance level. Sometimes it's similar, and it depends on the type of debt. What I would say is that clients that sign up with TrueAccord in that sort of tentative way to check us out all increase their volume with us. And Meg, I don't know if you have any stats to share around that in particular.
Relative to the number of placements we have?
Yeah, relative to, we've got clients that sign up for us. So for example, from 2018 to 2019, we grew over 100% in placements and in revenue with existing clients that we had on board in 2018 that, came on board and were trying us out. And when they see the results, tend to just sort of increase, continue to increase placements with us, give us more market share, or find new portfolios within their inventory to place with us, which is, I think, speaks to the overall performance. The other thing I would say is because we're super non-invasive and non-threatening, one of the things that I think gets companies into some consumer trouble is you've got an aggressive collector on the phone who's worried about making their commission with a stressed out consumer who's worried about making ends meet. And that's not good. That's like oil and water. So one of the other things that we look at is, levels of complaints, levels of lawsuits, which I would say are dramatically under what we see with our competitors and what our clients see with competitors.
It's actually a great segue to an audience question we got, which is how do we measure customer experience, especially on digital channels?
So customer experience, right? So we collect customer feedback frequently. We do spend time going to Google reviews and the Better Business Bureau reviews to come through, the good and the bad. On a 5-star scale on Google ratings, we're at a 4.8, which is somewhat unheard of for a collections agency. So we know, right? We hear, outside of the walls of TrueAccord, what customers are saying about us, but then within the walls, right? The nature of our business, we do receive complaints just like any other agency out there. Sheila mentioned relative to our competitors, it's a very low rate, but we take those very seriously, right? So we work through those to understand what the trends are. We are working from a client success perspective to take what operations, our collections teams and operations teams are hearing, what they're documenting, and translating that to our clients to make sure that we're addressing any root cause issues that might exist. So we think of client experience or customer experience from a variety of different lenses.
Yeah, that's great. And I think we have time for a couple more questions. So this was an interesting one. Should we be preparing for another stimulus? Given the uncertainty around everything, do you think people will rush to spend it in the same way as the first one, even if it is the same amount?
Question of the hour.
Yeah, it is. And it would only be speculative, right? I think that, one of the points Mega said is, when a consumer has debt hanging over their head, it's something that you think about all the time. And I've had friends that have had struggled with debt, and they make tough decisions about paying off debt or taking their kids on a vacation, which is also really important as a parent, right? And I think that to the extent possible, all things being equal, we will continue to see consumers who find themselves having some extra income, particularly now when that Disney vacation is less likely to happen. I think, we would see more of that being used to pay down debt. It's just, and it's a guess. It's all guess.
And the other variable, right, that is thrown into the equation right now is where we are seasonality wise, knowing that, fourth quarter, there's typically a large prioritization on, holiday type activities and gift giving, and throw that into the mix too. It makes it even more uncertain, but certainly is another contributing factor.
Yeah, that all makes sense. We got a great question to end on, actually, and I'd love to hear from each of you. What is one piece of advice you would give to an organization looking to expand their collection channels?
Yeah, and this question is specifically about, it sounds like, expanding from text and voice, which I'm guessing this organization has now. I would say it's harder than one might imagine. So I think a lot of agencies and lenders are sort of taking their letter decks and turning it into email. So there's two things. If you're the creditor and you have a relationship with the customer, you have a better shot at getting emails delivered into inboxes because you have brand recognition. If you're a third party, landing in an inbox is very, very challenging. The advice that I would give, though, about starting to think about other channels, at TrueAccord, we have teams of people who look at, UX, user experience, customer experience. They're content developers, content writers. This is their full-time job. It's not something that they look at the letter deck once a year and see if they need to make legal modifications. They're doing A/B testing constantly on the content and trying to drive further engagement levels. So I think there's two things. One, invest some time and energy into what your messaging and what your content looks like. Think about the consumer experience around that. And also think about what intelligence you can gain out of that channel as well, so that you can use what you're learning as you continue to develop your strategies.
Yeah, there's so much greatness about that, Sheila. When we think about the differentiator that TrueAccord provides, right, which is truly meeting the clients or the customers where they want to be met during the collections process, and taking some of the embarrassment, the shame out of being in that situation. But I guess the advice I would give is, a comprehensive contact strategy is important, but the ability to kind of think beyond what your normal has been for years and years and years in determining which channels you think you want to start to explore, I think is important, because thinking of old may not necessarily carry forward into, truly setting a strategic vision for your contact strategy.
Yeah. Or you could completely accelerate and use our 7 years of experience in the space and yeah, we would be happy to help.
Yep.
Well, thank you so much, Sheila and Mega, for all of that information. I know I learned a ton today, and I'm sure everyone on this call did as well. Thank you for everyone who joined today. We're hoping to give you a little bit of time to get to your next meeting. Feel free to email us with any questions, or like Sheila said, if you're interested in learning more about our 7 years of experience in the space, we'd be happy to help.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.